Hello. Let me begin by asking you a question. What is your favorite subject in school? Well, in middle school and high school, my favorite subject was English. I think today you commonly refer to it as language arts. But now I have a PhD or a doctorate in biology, meaning that I went to school for 6 more years after college, and I work in the field of medical education. I'd like to begin by introducing myself and telling you the story about how I got to where I am today. My name is Rose O'Connor. I live here in Wallingford and I've lived here for about 10 years. I did grow up in Pennsylvania though as well. As I mentioned, I loved English in middle school and high school, particularly the writing aspect, both the creative writing and the research papers. If you haven't gotten to those yet, those are the papers that you'll need to research a subject and then provide really good references. But I also love the sciences, biology, chemistry, and later in high school, genetics. Thought it was so interesting to learn about the human body and then also to learn about heredity. How did genes pass from parent to kids and so forth? When I was thinking about time for college, and folks always want to know, what do you want to major in? What do you want to study? Someone asked me if I wanted to be a teacher because I really expressed my interest in English. And although I think teachers are fantastic, that really wasn't what I was called to do. So I decided to go to college and study biochemistry to combine my love of biology and chemistry. At the time I started college, I went to a really great engineering school, and some folks who started to become my mentors said that I should really kind of consider studying biochemistry in the engineering department. And then that led to, well, perhaps you should think about studying chemical engineering, and that would provide more opportunities when it came time to get a job, and you could still keep your biology and your chemistry interests in mind as well. Well, throughout my 4 years of college, I studied chemical engineering, but I was really a scientist at heart and I was missing biology. So I sought out summer internships and even independent study in the biology labs at my school. And I even worked for one summer here in a biotechnology company outside of Philadelphia. I graduated from college with a chemical engineering degree. And while many of my fellow graduates were preparing for their first jobs, I was preparing for graduate school. But I wasn't attending graduate school in engineering. I decided to pursue what I had really loved and had been missing, biology. For the next 6 years, I studied bone biology as it related to one of the diseases on the autism spectrum called Rett syndrome. And this is a disease that affects mostly little girls. I loved my graduate school time, my time in graduate school. I spent many hours in the lab doing experiments. In graduate school, you have to put in a lot of time. So I worked during the day and at night and on the weekends and some holidays, but that's kind of what's expected. And during that time, I was just learning as much as I could. In addition to doing those bench science experiments, I was also learning how to read and interpret scientific papers or publications that were coming out all of the time in medical journals from doctors and scientists and researchers around the world. And that was really interesting and important as well. But I was still missing something. I loved writing, and I was always looking for opportunities to write about science whenever and wherever I could. Somewhere around halfway through graduate school, my mentors invited me to co write a book chapter with them about bone biology. I thought that was so interesting. What a fantastic experience. I really got so much into it that I realized that I liked writing more than I even liked being in the lab. And so that was something important to know. When my fellow graduate students were leaving graduate school, and many of them decided to follow a more traditional career path, and they completed what's known as a postdoctoral fellowship, which meant they continued on in the lab, either the lab that they had studied in or even going on to another lab, doing experiments and continuing learning. But that didn't feel like quite the right fit for me. And so I had to do some of my own research, talk to some different people, and kind of figure out what the right path for me was. I was able to follow my passion and found the perfect fit in my first job in medical communications. It combined my love of science and writing together, and I was able to use my training from graduate school as well, particularly that part about reading and understanding and interpreting scientific papers. My first job was in an office. It was actually an old mansion that was converted into a really homey, comfortable office environment. There was only about 20 of us that worked in this company, and I really enjoyed that job. I had terrific coworkers. I learned so much about medical communications and summarizing those scientific papers in a simple way. And I had incredible mentors there who sat beside me or down the hall, and they helped me learn along the way. Real great hands-on experience. I worked in that job for about a year and a half, and then I really focused my work in medical education, and that's what I've been doing for about the last 10 years. I wonder how many of you have heard of medical education? I know that in medical school, middle school or high school or even college, I certainly hadn't. And medical education is different from medical school, and that's not what I'm referring to. In my field, we develop educational programs for doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals who are practicing, who are in the office or the hospital already. So doctors and other healthcare providers are required to continue learning throughout their careers. In fact, in Pennsylvania, doctors are required to attain 100 CME credits or continuing medical education credits every 2 years. That means they need an average of 50 hours per year of continuing education. It's more than a week's worth of work every year just learning. My team develops educational programs using different formats, PowerPoint slides, text-based documents, videos, three-dimensional animations, simulations, and more. Some of the examples of the diseases that we provide education on are asthma, diabetes, and even cancer. Do you know someone who has asthma and perhaps required to use an inhaler? Well, my team has developed a video to help show what the lungs and the bronchial tubes look like in someone who has asthma. Why is it difficult for them to take a breath? So that's been one interesting component. Or maybe you know someone who has diabetes and they're required to test their blood sugar and maybe even take medication every day or more than once a day, perhaps insulin shots. Over the past couple of decades, there's even been more advances in diabetes, and there's new medications and opportunities for treatment. And so we educate doctors and other healthcare professionals on some of those new advances. And in this past year, we all became very familiar with COVID-19. Evolving information, new understanding about the disease that seemed to happen almost every day, as well as how the new vaccines work. That's surely been a hot topic of medical education for doctors and other healthcare providers around the world. One interesting thing about my job, or something I think is really cool, is that no 2 days are the same. Some days I'm focused on reading new scientific publications, interpreting what they mean, um, and how they'll fit into our work. Some days I'm working in PowerPoint and I'm drafting slides and thinking about how to make them interesting and but simple and easy to interpret. Other days I'm writing text, maybe 5 to even 30-page documents. Other days I'm in Zoom meetings with my coworkers, and that can include my video production staff as well. Still other days, I'm talking directly with expert doctors and healthcare professionals in the US and around the world. In the last few months, I've worked with doctors in the US, Canada, the Netherlands, and Germany. Another perk of my job is that in normal times, I have the opportunity to travel really around the world. I've been everywhere from the West Coast to Europe. So from San Diego to Chicago to Bermuda to Athens, Greece, and a whole bunch of places in between. For a career in the medical writing or the content development side of medical education that I do, someone would need to have at least a college degree in the sciences. But most of my colleagues actually have an advanced degree like I do. That can include a master's degree, a doctorate, or even a medical degree. Two of my colleagues have been through medical school and have an MD. In addition to having a science background, some of the skills that are really required to excel in this type of work is that to be detail oriented. And that's really important because the information that we're providing to doctors and other healthcare professionals needs to be accurate. They're going to remember that and they're going to think about that when they're treating patients. So we absolutely have to make sure we're giving facts. You need to be able to communicate well, both internally with the team that you work with in your office, as well as with the doctors and other providers that you're speaking with around the world. You need to be able to multitask. We have a number of different projects happening at the same time and at different places in their development. Perseverance, this is one is important because you need to be able to stick with projects from the very first time you're thinking about preparing them through their completion. And sometimes that can be 6 to 9 months or more. So making sure that you're able to stick with those projects. I think it's important that you are creative. And I want to clarify this. I don't mean creative in necessarily an artistic kind of way. I don't consider myself a great artist. In fact, I'm not even a good artist. But what I mean is to think outside of the normal way of doing things. Things aren't always yes or no, correct or incorrect, but being able to be open minded to other people's ideas and perhaps put those together in a way that is creative, different, new. I've talked a lot about my team. It's so important to be a good teammate. We work together as a team all the time. That's how we make things happen. We each bring our bit of expertise together. We communicate well and we respect each other. And that's how we get great work done. And I think probably one of the biggest things, one of the biggest skills that you need to have in this job is the willingness to keep learning throughout your career. Because as I said, scientific publications happen all the time, weekly, daily. And so you need to be able to keep learning and stay up to date. And that's super important. Maybe some of what I've said today about med ed is interesting to you, but you really aren't all that into science. And that's okay. You can still work in this field if you are a great writer, if you are super organized, you're interested in math, great at Excel spreadsheets, or if you're super creative and are interested in the more graphics and video production editing side of things. We all come together and work as a terrific team. To summarize today, I want you to know that you can and should keep learning throughout your life. Be curious, ask questions, be open to change. I encourage you to follow your interests, wherever that lead you. You don't need to stay in one career path your whole life. Continue your education in areas that you get excited about. Find great mentors. Wow, that's a terrific thing to do. And don't give up until you found the job that fits your interests and your skill sets. I want to thank you for listening, and I wish you all the best as you pursue your dreams.